Hey nerds, what's up? Today I'll be talking about The Thunder Heist by Jed Herne. See you after the jump. I'm coming at you today with another self-published book review by author Jed Herne. This one's kind of fun because this is not his debut novel. He's actually written a decent amount of self-published books. This is the first one I've read personally from him, but it's the start of a new series, which is always fun to kind of get involved with. And the second one is coming out soon in October. I guess that's not very soon, but it's somewhat soon. So it's a good time to kind of get in on the ground floor of the series. Now, I love a good heist story. In fact, when the author reached out to me and talked to me about this book and was kind of like, oh, it's a heist, I was immediately on board. I consider the remake of Ocean's 11 to be one of my favorite movies of all time still. Just love it so much. And I grew up with a lot of other heist movies that I liked a lot, like The Italian Job, and to a lesser degree, like The Transporter. And even now, recent movies, I'm a sucker for it. I loved Logan Lucky. I loved Now You See Me, just number one. And even kind of like Inception, right? I just love that sort of camaraderie, and I love all the stuff that heists have to offer. And of course, when you think of fantasy book heist, at least I automatically think of Mistborn: The Final Empire. In fact, that's really kind of like the only fantasy heist that immediately comes to my mind. I don't feel like I read a lot of heists in fantasy. So I was pretty excited to pick this one up. I thought it would be right up my alley. So let's get into my review of The Thunder Heist. Now, with self-published books, I always like to talk about the cover art because I feel like cover art is always important. It can really draw you in if you're going around a bookstore. But when you're traditionally published, you also have a lot of publicity behind you. So a lot of times I pick up traditionally published books just because I've heard a lot about them. Doesn't really matter if I hate or love the cover art. When it comes to self-pubbed works, I feel like cover art is a big deal. So I have to say, I really love this cover art. It was definitely something that drew me in. A small detail that I really like about it is that the title is behind part of the image. I know that's a really weirdly specific thing to like, but I just think it looks so professional, and I always like it when there's kind of like those foreground and background elements, especially around the text. So I noticed the detail and I liked it. I also tend to be kind of a sucker for blue-toned books, so I like that a lot. So I think the cover gets an A+ for me. I really like it. Okay, moving on to more things that I really liked about this book. First, it starts off with a bang. It's a very cinematic opening. It reminded me a ton of heist movies, just like that first scene that really gets you into the action, and I really enjoyed that. It set me up for what I was going to expect. It gave me the expectations I had going into this, which I think is a really positive thing. I also loved the world building in this. It's very cool. It's set on the sea, and the idea is that the land is filled with monsters. The mainland is uninhabitable. No one can go on it. So they've created city ships. By latching together a ton of ships, they form cities that kind of just float around the ocean. I really liked that. I thought it was very cool. I'm not usually kind of like an urban fantasy setting gal, but the way this was done, I actually really, really enjoyed it. It felt the perfect blend for me of something very fantasy with just a little urban. So I liked that, and I like this idea of floating city ships. It was very interesting to me, and I enjoyed that setting a lot. It's a great first entry to a series, but I also appreciate that it's pretty contained. I find that to be a positive. I read this book and it felt very complete. It felt like this might be more serial in nature, maybe something a little bit like the Dresden Files. I mean, I've only read one Dresden File, but that first book, it was a self-contained story. Obviously, there's going to be larger plots that kind of continue on, but it wasn't like a trilogy or something where there were tons of loose ends. At the end of this, I felt pretty contained, which is a positive to me. I like being able to read a book and enjoying it, and kind of that serial nature I thought was a positive. And this is a non-spoiler review, so I won't go into details, but I really did love this moment at the end that I consider a classic heist shenanigan. And I mean that in the best possible way. It wasn't something like I predicted. It was this moment between two characters and they're talking, and I'm like, yes, this is the good stuff. This is the stuff that I like about heists. There's just that very good fulfillment of expectations, not in a way that makes it burdensome or like I've read it before, but just kind of like one of those parts of heists that make it what it is. So I appreciated that scene. I really liked it a lot. Also, I really appreciated just like the female representation in this book. The main character is a female, but beyond that, the crew is half and half, and there's a female mob boss, and just a lot of the roles that we think of in heists that are usually male dominated were kind of flipped on their head and female. Like, other than Ocean's 8, the heist movies that I really love are usually male dominated. They're usually like one or two females, but most of the fact it's male. So I kind of like that this changed that up a little bit without feeling forced or trying too hard. It was just kind of what it was, and I noticed it and I appreciated it. So overall, if you are someone who loves heists and particularly loves like really actiony books that kind of throw you into it and give you like this character that fulfills that heist person, you're gonna really love this book. I do have some negatives though, so I'm gonna talk about what maybe didn't work for me in this book as much. Honestly, the biggest criticism I have is about the main character, and I think some of my other criticisms are kind of all wrapped up in that. My biggest problem with the main character is I just couldn't get a grasp on her. I just didn't really ever understand who she was. She obviously, like many heist, leaders, put on a front, but that front came down and came back in ways that didn't necessarily make a ton of sense to me. It wasn't like a through line, it wasn't a journey, or that we were finding out more about her. It felt more like she was two separate characters meshed into one. And because of that, it gave me a hard time buying into the heist. One thing is that there's like a big secret revolving the heist, and I think Herne waited a little too long to reveal it. I think he held his cards a little too close to his chest. The problem being is that I was just not invested in the outcome of the heist. Like, usually, like when I'm watching Ocean's 11, they just want money. Like, you don't find out about the whole like Danny Ocean's second plot test thing till decent of the way through, but I'm already invested in it succeeding for a couple of reasons, and for whatever reason, this didn't get me invested in the outcome. I actually didn't care if they succeeded or not, which probably isn't how I should feel about a heist. And the other part I think that comes with that is that our main character just wasn't very charismatic. When you think of all these heist movies, I all of a sudden realized that all of the leaders have this charisma, have this easiness to them. And Kef just didn't have that. She was more of somebody who just wanted to like go in guns blazing, which I like in a character. Like, I liked Kef, but it just didn't kind of fulfill that heist expectation for me, where this person kind of gets away with stuff. I mean, think of like Danny Ocean, and if you want to go book-wise, think of Kelsier, probably one of the most charismatic people in the Cosmere, because he gets us to like him even though he's a super sketchy dude. So I just wish there was more of that in Kef, and because of those two elements, I had a hard time feeling super invested in the outcome of the story. I found myself being like, well, if she succeeds or fails, I don't really care. It'll be interesting either way. This leads me into my second point, which is something that this book made me discover that I didn't necessarily know before, which I think a big part of what makes heist movies so successful to me is the camaraderie between all of the members of the team. The crew is very vital. And the problem I had with this book is that the crew members weren't really buddy-buddy. When I look at all of the movies that I love, particularly Ocean's 11, right? They're like a big family. They're very funny. They're very jokey, but that's not the only thing. I mean, you have an Italian Job. There's a super buy-in on why they're doing this. Again, they are also very close, like family. Mistborn, again, have that easy camaraderie where they're joking and laughing and they feel like family. The problem with this book is that they never felt like family to me. I never could really understand their relationships to each other. They were mostly strangers, which just bummed me out. I think because I didn't realize that that's a part I liked about Heist so much, was that. And it's interesting because in the book, she mentioned she has a regular crew, but for this particular job, she wants a new crew. And I completely understand why Herne did that, because the recruitment part of a heist is obviously the most fun. And I will say I did love the recruitment scenes. They were very, very fun. I love that part. But I missed them having like a rapport. So I wish he had written in maybe some more lightheartedness there, because I missed it. And that made me struggle a little bit. Again, that's all kind of wrapped in, I think, to our main character not being totally fleshed out in a way that made sense. I think if that had been fixed, a lot of these dominoes would have fallen into place for me. And then the final thing, I can't really go into because it would be a spoiler, but at the end, a secret is revealed, and it's revealed that this secret has been kept because if it wasn't, everyone would freak out and people would get in trouble. And I had a hard time buying into it because I felt like the way the society was set up was that this secret really wouldn't be a big deal. So if you've read the book, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. I'm not gonna go into any more detail. That's not a spoiler. You know from the beginning there is some sort of secret, you just don't know what it is. But I just couldn't buy into it that it would have been that big of a deal if the secret got out. Overall, that sounds like a lot of negatives. It really wasn't. It was just kind of like one big kind of character flaw that kind of tumbled down into other parts of the heist. Honestly, I think a lot of people are going to enjoy this book. It's a super easy read. It's a super fast-paced read. I was invested in keeping reading. Even though I said I wasn't invested in the outcome, I was still invested in the story. I liked reading it. If you particularly like books that read like movie scenes, very cinematic, I did love the way he described things in a way that I don't picture things a lot in my head, and the way Herne described things, there was a running movie in my head. Like I saw the scenes play out, which I think is very cool, and I think it's a skill that he definitely has. So I would recommend it. I think a lot of people will like this, and especially if you just need something to add to your TBR that's like fun and lighthearted, and you know you're gonna enjoy it in a couple days, I would say give the Thunder Heist a try. I think it's a really solid self-pubbed book that I read, and I enjoyed it even with its flaws. So if you like heists, I'd give it a try. Okay, I've been loving all the suggestions you guys have been giving me on self-pub books to read. I think the next few self-pubs I'm gonna read are gonna be all of the SBFBO winners. Thought it'd be really fun to do a video on all the winners and kind of which ones I liked and didn't like, or maybe I'll like them all, just do a video on that. So I think that will be fun. I'm always looking for more to read, so drop me your suggestions below. Also, let me know what you think about heists. I'm a huge sucker for them, and I'd love to know what your favorite heist movies or heist books are. Since I said I haven't really read a ton of fantasy heists, let me know what they do well. And as always, if you liked this video and want to see more, please subscribe, and you can check out what I'm currently reading on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.